For my refutation speech, I would like to begin my presentation with stating my opponent's main claim. His primary claim is that government internet censorship will have a negative effect on society. His secondary claims are: 1, reactions of the people to proposed censorship bills; 2, reactions of the people in other countries with internet censorship; and 3, reasons as to why governments believe internet censorship is a good idea. I will respond to 2 of these 3 claims, but first I would like to talk about an initial flaw in the structure of the claims. My opponent's first flaw in his speech is the use of the ambiguity for the use of the word reaction in his claim. I am assuming that my opponent meant the effects of the people that undergo censorship instead of the reactions. In his claims, he assumes that the word reaction is similar to effect. The definition of the word reaction is a feeling experienced in response to an event. For example, a person's reaction to limiting internet use would be anger. And an effect of limiting internet use would be a person getting into an argument with the oppressor. Because of this ambiguity, it is hard to tell whether his claims are claims of fact or if they are claims of value. My opponent stated for his first secondary claim that it is unconstitutional to pass the SOPA because it limits our rights, which are stated in the First Amendment. For those who don't know SOPA stands for Stop Online Piracy Act. This primary purpose of this act was to close down websites that illegally provided television shows or movies to viewers without consent of the companies. I agree that it is illegal to limit free rights, yet the idea behind my opponent's fallacy is that preventing people from downloading things online is unconstitutional. If that is true, then I could claim that I'm just borrowing the movies online without the owner's permission. This is a decorative way of saying I'm stealing your content. Because of SOPA's influence, some of the websites with pirated materials were closed down. The most famous one is known as Mega Upload. BBC News stated that Mr.com, who founded Mega Upload in 2005, has been accused of copyright theft, money laundering, and racketeering fraud. Prosecutors allege that pirated movies and other content shared throughout this site cost copyright holders more than $500 million in lost earnings. Because of SOPA's influence, websites such as these are being shut down, and this prevents movie and music industries from further financial losses and illegal distribution of material. For my opponent's claim on internet censorship in other countries, first I'd like to validate the primary difference between other countries and the United States. The United States government is a federal republic, which took its ideas from philosophies such as philosophers Montesquieu and John Locke. Stephen Palmer from The Social Leader wrote, James Madison said that our form of government is an extended, limited, commercial, federal democratic republic, or in other words, a constitutional democracy. Now, my opponent talked about China and Iran. China is a communist country with a partially capitalistic economy, and Iran is an Islamic republic, which is a type of theocracy. IndexMundi.com calls a theocracy a government subject to religious authority. The Chinese and Iranian government are completely different from the form of government that the United States has. The United States, which is a more capitalistic government and separates church from state, cannot be compared to countries that are partially communist and countries that are theocratic republic, just as democracy does not have similarities to dictatorship. Almost every country in the world is different, but many countries adopt similar forms of government, generally those in Europe. Since the countries my opponent uses for comparison have no similarities whatsoever, it is flawed to make a comparison at all for any case, including that of internet censorship. In conclusion, the main intention of SOPA is not utilized for internet censorship, but for the prevention of stealing online material. Also, making a comparison of censorship to countries with different types of government is not credible unless the governments are similar. Internet censorship in the United States helps prevent viewers from seeing things such as child pornography and animal cruelty. With the establishment of government internet censorship, things such as child pornography and animal cruelty are removed from the availability of most, if not all, viewers. This form of censorship definitely has a positive effect on society. Therefore, my opponent's claim of the government internet censorship having a negative effect on society is a false premise.
Well, everything's pretty solid here. I like the way that you basically make an argument about the ambiguity of the word reaction. You raise an issue about whether or not it's a claim of fact or a claim of value. I think that's a reasonable point to make up. The question then becomes, though, if it is a claim of value, what's problematic with that claim of value, or should we not be considering it? So I think you need to take the next step and make a claim in relationship to your conclusion here. On the first point concerning SOPA and whether or not it's unconstitutional, you start to sound like you are basically conceding that restrictions would be unconstitutional, but then you end up supporting the notion that these regulations are perfectly legal because they involve preventing stealing content, and then you've got an example about how it's had this particular benefit. I don't know that any of your argument applies directly to some of the criticisms that the advocate made of SOPA, and I think you need to be a little bit more specific on a couple of those points. But the general idea here that it's really not about regulating content, but regulating the way people are distributing information that isn't theirs, I think that that's an important distinction to be made. The second argument basically tries to deny the validity of the analogy that the advocate seems to be making between other countries and their use of censorship and the United States. And I think you do a good job showing that there is a substantial difference between the way the two countries that are mentioned are likely to perceive the content that's available online versus what the United States is going to do. I think there's there's some other arguments that you can make here that suggest that the United States government is incapable of making those kinds of decisions that would be problematic. I think you end up following through on the claims that there are some benefits of some restrictions and that nobody objects to these kinds of restrictions. I think you're probably correct on that point, and you mentioned the illustrations of child pornography, for instance, as a way of illustrating that point. That seems pretty reasonable. I thought the summary was really effective at telling us what it was we were supposed to get out of the argument. All right, thank you.